Namaste. A few words before we start the exploring the journey within. Human beings are marked or characterized by the urge for progress. It's almost like, quite unlike animals, we are explorers, we are wanderers right from the days that humanity has been born. We are seekers. We raise questions and try to find answers. And in the whole process, we always try to go beyond the limits that have been formed for us by nature. So, this is what characterizes us humans. Now, this trying to go beyond the boundaries and progress has taken two forms. One is outward, where we try to understand the phenomenal world, dig deeper into it, go further and further, in search of what lies behind all this surface phenomena that floats right in front of our eyes. And we have reached a point where we can almost say that what we see, we hear, we touch, we smell, we feel, we think, all of it. Is it real or is it an illusion? Is it a play of atoms floating in space which create the sense of a personality? Or is there a substantial reality behind all this phenomenal consciousness? Of course, the average person doesn't bother about it. He is comfortable with the phenomena and dealing with it. That's the practical kind of humanity. But more and more we realize that even from the purely practical point of view, it is not enough if we really remain on the surfaces of life. If we deal with phenomenon as if that alone was real, if we deal with phenomenon like that, we find ourselves severely handicapped at several levels and in many, many ways. So even from the most pragmatic point of view, man must search if there is something deeper, if there is something stable, if there is something permanent. It doesn't matter what we call, what name we give it. And in this process, science has taken a route where it goes further, or rather material science, where it digs deeper and deeper and tries to understand what lies behind the phenomenon. But there is another approach which has been known since ancient times, and that approach is going within, because we are available to ourselves. It's not easy to go deeper into the phenomena. Now we have the tools. People have taken millenniums to study, understand, categorize, go deeper. Now, with new tools, one tries to go deeper and deeper. But the other way is to go within, and when we go behind the phenomenal being that we know as ourselves, we enter into subjective spaces. See, that is a interesting way of approaching life. Normally, we look at the world and we try to understand it objectively, but there is a whole subjective world. To take an example, when we turn within and study the states of consciousness, we realize that, there are, in one particular day, we just take a day, from morning till night, we go through several states of consciousness. We may wake up and say, I am feeling fresh, whatever it means, try defining it. Or I am feeling very enthusiastic. And then day passes, and then we go through hunger and anger and happiness and sorrow and countless states. States when we are very quiet, states when we are excited and agitated. And yet this moves within a certain circle. We go round and round within a certain kind of subjective phenomenon. Just as we have an objective phenomenon, we have a subjective reality within, and we usually use the word personality. We give the term personality to these many subjective states with which we are identified. For instance, we are used to a certain kind of thoughts and we say, this is me. Or a certain kind of feelings which we are very used to, we catch them habitually and say, this is me. And whatever is other than that, we don't understand. In fact, we think it doesn't exist. Or else, if it exists, we are in conflict with it because it's not me. But yogis have gone deeper. All yoga is about, yoga is another kind of science where we go deeper and understand, is there a stable basis behind all these different states of consciousness? And what we discover, first discovery that we make is that these states are shifting from morning to night automatically. It is as if we are floating on sea rather than being solidly grounded. And from morning till night, we are in different states, and we wonder why it is so. Anyone, and we try to find a key. We don't have the key ordinarily, and we just flow through it as it comes. In other words, we are carried towards some great unknown goal, or perhaps no goal, as some people would say, through these states of consciousness, and we don't know how to handle it. Then there comes a little more awakened humanity, and it says, no, I must master myself. It's not, I don't want to lead life like a slave. I feel excited and I start, moving about, and I feel angry and I blurt out. I feel quiet and then I can't act in life. So the next level of humanity is where it wants to master these states. And that's where real yoga steps in. Then we try several ways, and through these ways, humanity has found some methods through which we can achieve this self-mastery and self-conquest. Now, why I'm using these terms is because all deepening, heightening, widening is essentially to return back upon the field in which we are operating and to give us a vantage point so that we can act with a greater knowledge, with a greater power, with a greater delight, with a greater peace, with a greater harmony in all we do. Otherwise, just entering into a state of self-discovery, very often, we hear the word enlightenment. Yes, but enlightenment is of no use if it enlightens the soul but leaves the field unenlightened. This enlightenment must enter the field. It's like when you have a lamp lit, it must light up the entire room and not just that little area around the lamp. Similarly, this power should not be just to make us feel that, yes, who would be satisfied with that kind of power that helps us to quit the field? It should be a power that enters into the field and operates in ways that are unknown to us. It should be a new kind of cognition, even a new kind of delight in whatever work we are doing. So that's why there is a need to break free from the magic circle in which nature holds us imprisoned. So when we look at life in a certain way from this internal perspective, we see that all creatures are held within a kind of bubble or a magic circle which nature has built around them, and they believe that that's it. That is the ultimate limits. Now, I have several examples. One of them which I used to give was, in Pondicherry there is a Ganesh temple, and when you cross the Ganesh temple, you would see an elephant who is, standing at the door, and everybody would go give her some coconut and she would give some blessing. This all she was doing. She was in chains. Later on they freed the chains, but she would stand there. So, I would often wonder that why is she standing there? She is far more formidable creature. If she comes, all that she needs is, instead of blessing, just to know what power she contains. And every human being will be running helter-skelter. Why is she standing like a slave even when her chains are open? Just because of the conditioning. That's how elephants are trained. I came to know that, initially they are tied with the chain. Later on, they are trained and taught so that even when the chains are open, they will not move. They believe they are chained. Now, this is exactly what nature has done to us, so much so that we believe that we are whatever we experience at a given point of time, and our personality is formed, fixed, our character is, a bundle of habits, but whatever it is given to us, and that's all there is. But yoga teaches us there is much more to it than we can sense, than we can understand, than we can, our operating system through which we meet the challenges of life. And that's where the expansion of consciousness in different directions comes in. Now, why consciousness? Because phenomena is something relatively fixed. But we have within us something which we use, for which we use the term consciousness. And here it will be good to note that consciousness is not same as energy. Very often, people use the terms interchangeably. Energy is energy and consciousness is consciousness. That's why the terms are different. Energy is like the fuel. So we can have a very pure kind of energy which moves us. We can have a very gross fuel. To give an example, crude desires is a very crude fuel. It can push us suddenly like a kickstart, but very soon it emits a lot of smoke, which begins to choke our arteries and every other system. On the other hand, it can be a very refined kind of fuel. For instance, a sattvic man, he will operate not just for the fulfillment of desires, but for following a law of life, according to the law of truth. So there is a difference between the fuel. So there is an energy which operates within a system. This energy itself can be upgraded. But to upgrade this energy, we need to shift the consciousness. That's why our consciousness stands behind energy. And consciousness is the power of awareness and the power of execution, which is there fundamentally in this entire creation. All creation is an act of consciousness, we may say. It is the fundamental non-material reality, yet it conditions itself to the form and the material reality. So it is the non-material basis, fundamental basis of existence. It is there, and this has within it knowledge and will, and through it, when it limits its knowledge and will, we have different creatures, and it builds forms within which it limits itself. So right now we are at that point where it has limited itself into the human form, and the human shape, and the human vessel, and the human personality, and operates within those limits. But since human beings carry an urge to go beyond the limits, we are incorrigible freedom lovers. Set a limit and man wants to break it. Make a rule and we want to discover what it means to break a rule. We are born with that impulse. It's so strange that animals like lion and elephants, you tie them, they will rarely transgress the jungle and come into the city. But man has this tendency. He will go to Amazon, he'll go to that forest. I am talking of the Amazon, the forest, and he'll dive deep into the seas. He will go out of his territory to explore every limit and beyond limits. So yoga satisfies that urge for the adventure within man. And this is not just satisfaction, but to fulfill ourselves, we need to expand the boundaries or the limits within which we are trapped. And here we can make these three basic movements. Consciousness can go beyond the mind. I believe it has already been spoken of. And we can discover new ways of cognition, new ways of feeling, new ways of experiencing life, new kinds of power that are right now asleep within the limits that nature has given us. Or it can expand and become wide, and me and mine, which is trapped within the little sense of a name and a surname, can expand and include other creatures, not only human beings, plants, animals, further into earth, and it can expand further where it can say, as Sri Aurobindo says in one of his poems, that I have wrapped the wide world in my wider self, and London and Tokyo and Paris, my spirits seeing are. I am the man's few good deeds. I am the beast he slays and the bird he saves. So all these one can expand and identify with it. Now imagine the potential of such an expansion, because then one can operate not only through one body but many operating systems. This is precisely how Mother and Sri Aurobindo were working in the World War, in the disciples, what they would do. So when we turn to Mother, how does she do? We think, she is a separate individuality and we are a separate individuality. She must give us something in writing and we must follow the instructions. That's not how divine beings operate. She says, I just go inside you, shift the needle of consciousness because you are within me, a part of me. So when we begin to identify with her, she begins to change us even when we are asleep, even when we are not aware. So this is the potential that man has. And the third movement of which we will speak today is to go deeper and deeper. Now, why this going deeper and deeper is concerned is, again, when we look at the body, we understand that this body is ever changing from dawn to dusk. Why speak of birth to death? And it's constantly moving towards something which appears to us as the end of our journey. So is there something more than the body, beyond the body? And then we discover that yes, there is something which we call as a personality. Now this personality itself is largely a construct. It's a construct which partly we are born with certain things we pick up from home, then our parents and elders and education and society. So there is a construct, religious constructs, belief systems, and we automatically pick them up and we say, this is me. But is that the only me, or is there something still deeper? We discovered that even that is an illusion. There is an illusion of personality. So when we go deeper and deeper to search, who is this me? Is there a stable, permanent me behind all these changing appearances? My thoughts change from morning to night. My feelings change from morning to night. As I said, different states of consciousness crowd one upon another. Is there a master key to all this? Or am I a helpless victim? Or is there an I at all? So this is how the search can start. It can start in three different ways. One is the search for truth, the reality behind all appearances, the stable enduring basis, doesn't matter what we call. So this is usually how an intellectual search starts, by reflection, by contemplation, by looking at life, looking at ourselves, by becoming a witness to our own being. And then we begin to wonder, who is this who is watching the thoughts? You see, it's a very interesting discovery. We say, I was thinking this. So who is this I who was thinking, who was watching the thoughts? Or I felt like this. So even during the feeling, there is something which can separate. It's like in a dream. Who was the dreamer? Who was seeing the dream? So this way, when we reflect and when we go deeper and deeper, intellectually, so to say, we discover the true I within, an indestructible element which, which does not perish. We arrive at that stable bedrock from where all this whole thing is proceeding, and who is the master of this house. So this one way, the becoming the witness. The second way, which we can do while being in life, is through works, and this is something very interesting. Now, why are we not able to go within? Very often, people are taught methods of concentration and meditation. In fact, part of that intellectual process is concentration and meditation. We pick up an idea, for instance, who am I? And we concentrate upon it, or more positively, I am that. And we concentrate upon that, but it's very difficult. So the reason is because we are tied to the surfaces. We are tied all the time to the phenomenon, and through all the senses, consciousness is pouring outside. And nature has played a game that right from childhood, it ties us to certain posts. So it ties us to, immediate caregivers, parents. Now, if we really look at life, it's very interesting that each of these persons to whom our consciousness is tied actually is nothing else but the representation of something which, we can use the word divine. Parents, the nourisher, the nurturer, friend, somebody who can listen, understand, beloved, husband, wife, somebody who will perennially walk with us on the pathways of life, even child, the offspring born out of us as something new. Now, actually, because we are not yet ready for that, glory and greatness, it ties us to these little packages which represent it. And so long as we are satisfied with these appearances, nature plays the old game. Old game means we remain tied to the surfaces, and we are happy or we are sad, and we say that we can do nothing about it. And the mother uses, her last conversation where she says, most of us like prisoners. So we are tied to these surfaces as prisoners, and nature continues to play this game ad infinitum, ad nauseam. But a time comes when we say we don't want to play this game in this way. We don't even know the terms of the game. Who is playing the game with us? It's a cruel joke if you look at it like this, that everything is wonderful and tomorrow it crashes. So this also serves as a catalyst to tell us, no, I want to know the rules of the game. I want to know who has initiated the game. Am I a stakeholder? Am I a conscious participant? And that's when we start searching for something through the mystic path. Now, mysticism doesn't go in the intellectual way. It takes another approach. It says there is a mystic feeling or an intuition that there is God, that there is a being. I'm right now not going into the a discussion of whether God is a being or not. He is both and more, to say the least. And logically, we can talk about it. But it has the mystical feeling and intuition that there is God. And even this intuition can pinpoint it that He is in the heart. Ask any human being that, tell us about yourself. Very naturally, our hand goes to the heart. We don't say, yes, I'll tell you about myself. Now, if you do this gesture, it's like, it's not a good gesture to do. It's when you curse your fate. It's not where the I is. Or you don't stroke your belly and say I. It's not a good gesture again. But very naturally our hand goes to the heart and say me, my. In India we even do this namaste. So this is basically because there is a presence in the heart which we don't understand. We use the word God, we use the word, this is the temple within us, and mystics start moving toward that through a process which is called as self-giving, surrender, etc. But as I said, initially we have to, if we remain tied to the appearances, we cannot go within. So the process that acts as an intermediary is to diminish the desired self which ties us and binds us to these outposts of ignorance. So how to diminish desired self? The word itself becomes very frightening. I remember in one of the camps, after a 1-week camp on the Gita, one of the ladies remarked, Doctor, wonderful things you said. Please don't ask us, however, to conquer the desired self. So I said, yes, I understand. It's pretty frightening. But well, we have a choice to make. Either we remain tied to that or we discover something greater than desire. Oh, there is something greater than desire. Yes. Why do we desire things? Because we believe by having it, we will have pleasure or joy. But what if we have a self-existent delight? Oh, is it possible? Yes, precisely. So when it is said that go beyond the desired self or behind the desired self, Shiband even used the word psychic prana in one of his earlier writing, it is, or the double soul in man, or the false soul, or the soul of desire. Now this, if we remain tied to it, we have a very limited gain. We have pleasure followed by pain. We have some happiness and sorrow follows suit. This is a grace actually, because otherwise we'll forever remain tied. So nature has made this old contract. We have signed the contract form. If we ask for one pleasure, it will say, okay, 2 pain you have signed in the footnote. Ask for 1 happiness on the surface, and grief is bound to come. So it helps to shake us from the comfort zone. Whereas when we go still deeper, then we discover a self-existent delight. So how to come out of this desired self? There are several ways. One is what is called as the Nishkam Karma. So we are tied to things by the result. Oh, what will I get? We do a job because our eye is on the pay package or the promotion, the scope that we have. Or we want recognition, or we enter into a relationship to have love, or we get something from there, joy of togetherness or whatever. So the result is that we are all the time tied by the results. So Gita teaches us, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about it, one of the first things necessary before we can talk about ascent of the sacrifices, to not cut our moorings, but make them at least loose. Instead of a strong Rajasic element, bring in the Sattvic element. That's not just that what I am getting out of life, but also what I am giving. But the Gita goes still further. It says, regardless of your dealings with the world, deal with everyone and everything as if you are doing it to God, to the divine presence in others and within. And he goes on to this extent, that he says, when you receive something from someone, so take it as it is coming from the divine. Now this something is not just a material gift. It can be an emotional gift. It can be an intellectual gift. And equally when you are giving something to someone, don't give it with this idea, I am giving to this little personality, this person. It is going to the divine in the person. And then he goes on to say, even if the recipient rejects the gift, you give it to a person and the person throws it away or doesn't care. If you have given it with this idea that it is given to the divine understands, he smiles and he starts pulling us inward. So that it's not just that we have to make an effort to go within. There is someone within who will pull us. But for that we have to loosen the strings with which we are tied to the surfaces of life. That story where a man boatman. Whole night he tries to row the boat, but the boat doesn't move. In the morning, he discovers he had forgotten to untie it from the, that little anchor to which the boat was tied. The ship can't move into the sea if the anchor remains where it is. So, this movement is one of the most fundamental, most neglected. I've seen tons of classes of, advertisement on meditation and concentration. Quite a good amount of money goes into it. People are taught a technique and method. Well, we can scratch the surface if we want, but if desire self remains tied where it is, we won't be able to go very deep inside because it'll hold us, it'll pull us back. That's why Sri Aurobindo, when he speaks of meditation in Savitri, how beautifully he puts it this way, that in moments when the inner lamps are lit and life's cherished guests are left outside, our spirit sits alone and speaks to the gulfs. So the practice is remember and offer. One of the fundamental practices of yoga. To remember the divine in everything and everyone. Now here again Sri Aurobindo says something very interesting in one of his conversations. He says it's easier to do it with static things. For instance, it's easy to, live with the idea that the divine is in the wall, in the plants, even in animals up to a point. But when it comes to men who are moving, wicked people, it's very difficult to do it. But he says even then it should be done. The yogin has to keep his eyes fixed on his goal. Yes, no doubt there is wickedness, good and evil in this world. We'll come to that. We'll understand it in a better perspective if we really, really learn to look behind appearances. So when we start focusing and centering our life on the divine, and for that we can take the help of an idea, an image, a form. What idea, image or form? Any idea, any image, any form. What should we offer? Anything. A drop of water, a leaf, a flower, a feeling, a thought. The divine within knows and accepts. So, any idea which represents to us the divine. We may use the word God, we may use the word thou, we may use the word supreme, Lord, doesn't matter. I was so happy and touched when I read in one of mother's conversations. He says, for a long time, the mantras he used. Now imagine the moment we use the word mantra, all our ears on Sanskrit, something will come. For a long time, the mantra she used was, my Lord. Just imagine. Just to look at my Lord. Who is my Lord? Who is my Master? Who is the Lord of creation? My Lord. And the Lord would manifest. So it is whatever makes us feel connection with the divine. The divine sense. Let's not define him. Defining him creates religions. He is all and more than the all. He is in all. All is in him. All is him. So then the question is, all is him. Then what next? Where do we go? Well, because he is constantly moving forward. There is a very beautiful sloka in the Ishopanishad. Tade jati, tanne jati, tad dure, taduvantike. He is constantly moving forward. Even the gods cannot catch him. Therefore, we have to move from the lesser manifestations of the divine to the divine of tomorrow. So this way, when we start looking at life, we change it from egocentric, me-centric, me as we understand, to divine-centric. The more we make life divine-centric, then slowly it changes into we start loving him because we are seeing him in all beings. We start wanting to serve him, to give ourselves to him, surrender to him. So when we start living life this way, after a while we see there is a separation. And there is a separation between what we believed ourselves to be and what we truly are. We start dwelling in a state of consciousness where we know within conviction. It's not even an intuition. Intuition is still something which you are seeing outside. There is an identification that even if the universe were to collapse, this would remain. Now, the moment we realize it, life is beautiful, because then the field of nature, of course, the yogin in integral yoga will enter into the field of nature, but now with a new identity. So wherever he goes, in whatever field, because in integral yoga, nothing can be left. So, it's not only climbing on peaks of nature, but I believe, as one of the sessions, entering into the subconscious. So what happens when you enter into the subconscious? You see, there are two ways people enter into the ocean. One, they drown. They're helpless. They're caught in the current, they drown. Second is they go with swimming suits, diverse suit, and they are always held by the rope above. So when you go down and you see a shark and you feel this danger, all that you need to do is to do this little, some kind of signal, and you are pulled up. So when we go down with a new identity that I am none else but the child of the Divine Mother, the imperishable one, indestructible, the immortal self, then even when appearances are dark, sometimes there is a dungeon also in which we enter. There is a complex play of forces, web of forces. Yet, because we are connected to her very deeply and intimately, it's very easy for us to open the door. Mother gives a very interesting example that, there is storm raging outside. And what will you do that time? So if you have the key, you open the door and come inside. Now this key that can open the doors to the divine is the psychic being within us. And one of the quickest way to discover it is through devotion, through surrender, through dedicated service to the divine. So the moment we use the word devotion, the prayer, the human mind, we are all same. Why should we pray? Well, even at human level, we see that there is at least some kind of a evolutionary hierarchy. Fundamentally, we are all same. But it's not only to humanity. Even animals, plant life, we can say fundamentally everything is same. But in manifestation, there is a hierarchy. So there is a greater possibility, our own greater self. And when we love, we have this unique capacity within us to love. Now we begin to become in the image of someone we love. It is known that when two people live close together in close contact, even if they fight, they begin to become, even the physical beings begin to resemble each other. So basically, it's when we love someone, when we worship. Shaubindo has that beautiful line in Savitri where he says, for worship lifts the worshipper. He is lying in the dust. So what is the gesture? When you prostrate at the feet of God. So what happens next? You have done your bit. The next is he leans down and holds us and lifts us. So this is the gesture. So worship, devotion, surrender. What is this surrender? Surrender is to start with this, that my life belongs to you. And whatever may happen with it, you are the one who is responsible. We carry the burden of responsibility. Because we have this strong idea that we are the one who are controlling life, manipulating life. But when we come to the divine and say, well, I'm yours, and take me and carry me, you are the master of my destiny, well, he will take us. It doesn't mean life will be simple and easy. Arjuna had surrendered to Krishna and he had to go through the Kurukshetra. But because he surrendered to Krishna, we go through all these appearances. This is what is called as the sunlit path. But eventually we come out unscathed. As if there is a protecting hand which surrounds us. So through this love for God, through this surrender, through this self-giving, and then we surrender not only that, first surrender that my life is yours. It should come from within to start with. But also, this surrender should go into detail. Some people say, well, I can't change because, I am anger prone. So what to do? Somebody says something and I get angry. Yes, well, to start with, I may be anger prone, but there is a much greater strength than mine, much greater power that can change this anger prone beast within me to a vehicle or a vahana of God. So basically, when we offer that movement, what is this offering? Ma, I am prone to anger. Ma, I am pricked by the heat of lust. Ma, I am problem of greed. Ma, I have difficulty of all these thoughts swirling in my head. Once we have formed the connection, I offer it with a will to change. And we will see the magic. It's magical. There is a very beautiful, powerful line in Savitri. It has to be experienced to be believed. A prayer, then suddenly a magic leverage is caught. A prayer, a master act, a king idea can link man's strength to the transcendent force. Then miracle is made a common rule. A lonely thought becomes omnipotent. One mighty deed can change the course of things. So, all that is needed is to grow in that consciousness and sincerely aspire. See, there are two ways we can relate with God. One is, I'll not budge an inch, I'll remain what I am. You fulfill my house, fill it with all the gadgets and things that I want. Well, if we want to play that role, God will play. He plays according to. See, it's interesting that actually He plays according to the rules we set for Him. And those rules are nothing else but our faith. So we set the rule for Him that look, we have to do everything. But whenever I'm in crisis, you must come and intervene. He says, okay, fine, I'll do that. Or we may play by the rules that your job, we give a job description to God. Your job is that, well, you must satisfy and fulfill all my desires. You say, okay, artharthi. So, He will do that. Or we will say, you are no good. You are just a witness. Everything man must achieve by his own effort. He will say, okay, I'll become the eternal witness. Vast, impersonal void. Or we may say, you are actually nothing. He'll say, okay, fine, I conceal myself and I become nothing. So who sets the rules? We set the rule. And that rule is by faith. Or we may say, this little bundle of creatures, habits, thought, feelings, what I call as myself and what the world calls as myself, Lord, take it and change it, mold it into the image that you want me to become. I have a certain will about life and things, but let your will be done. Now, this is the core of surrender. Surrender is not just about giving some money and all that. Surrender is about giving one's character and saying that, look, change me into a more beautiful image. See that line in Savitri. A mutual debt binds man to the supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. His human portion we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key. So when we start proceeding, living life like that, and it's a constant journey, it's not a 10 minutes meditation or half an hour meditation. It's living life with this idea of serving the divine, loving the divine, seeking the divine, finding the divine. And then, as some of the Indian legends go, there's this story of Mirabai that, when she was given, it's popular tale in Indian mythology, Vish ka pyala pee karke Mira ho gayi diwani. I mean, when she was given poison, and there is another story of Prahlad like that. She drank poison, but that poison changed her state into further ecstasy. It didn't kill her, she merged into Krishna. So that's because she lived with this idea that all is that comes to me comes from her, him, comes from her. And all that goes from me goes to her. It's a way of life. It's not a practice or a process. And we won't even realize that how, through all the events and circumstances of life, where we have reached, the change that will come is beyond our expectation. I have seen, and this is the way that Mother and Sri Aurobindo incidentally have maximum emphasized. People have turned them into philosophers, but if you read through Sri Aurobindo's writings, Mother's writings, look at the synthesis of yoga. Even those writings which have come before, the Mother's final arrival. Look at Sri Aurobindo's writing. Starts with yoga of divine works, where it's all about dedicated, dedication to the eternal, dedication to the divine, consecration in works, surrender in works, sacrifice to the divine within. Then comes the yoga of knowledge, integral knowledge. And it crowns with the yoga of divine love, where in all relations, in everything, we become, as it is said in the Gita, mad bhavam mad gata. Full of him, full of her. And when that happens, life assumes a different note, life changes. Or let me put it, life begins, because we live like prisoners. There is a third method also which sometimes works. And that method is the love for humanity. The Mother speaks of it in one of her early writings. She says there are people who are deeply moved by compassion. They look at humanity and its suffering. Basically, in all these methods, we are stepping out of a little shell, ego identity. Yoga of knowledge, I must find that which is deeper than my little ephemeral self. Yoga of love, it's the ultimate Forget me, just the divine. And the yoga of love for humanity, it's not about me that I am living. I am living to serve those human beings who need help. And there she says there are four kinds of gifts we can give to humanity: material gifts, intellectual gifts, spiritual gifts, and integral gifts. So, through whatever means, when we look at suffering humanity, we want to assuage it. It's a great compassion, and the automatically consciousness widens, deepens. We go within because the ego cannot connect like that. The moment we enter into the ego, it's all about living for one's selfish ends. But the moment we have something larger, then automatically the soul steps out. So, one movement is, of course, we should spend some time in concentration in the heart center and going within, and we will experience various things. For instance, we have the first difficulty will be the physical consciousness, which is obstinate like a block. So, there are people who try to sit and meditate and concentrate in the heart, in the center of the chest, and they can imagine a flame. It starts with an image or the Divine Mother, and as they go within, they realize that 2 months I just can't go within. It's the physical consciousness which is obstinate, tamas. So try all means. That's why, ahar, vihar, how much we are sleeping, when we are eating, exercise, all this makes the physical consciousness little more amenable to going within. At the same time, one has to be more persistent. That's the difficulty. So one day the door opens and we begin to go a few inches inside. Then comes the vital. And it's beautifully described in Savitri, entry into the inner countries and the triple soul forces. And the vital will start playing a game. It'll say, you know what, you are God, you are an instrument of God, you are a channel. And, there are people who have completely lost the way, thinking, Mother and Sri Aurobindo now, and we are beyond them, above them, and we are doing their work. All kinds of nonsense may start. Megalomania, because vital will use this, because when we go within into the inner vital, the inner mental, it's a much vaster domain than the outer. That's why surrender and humility are so important. Mother says sincerity, humility, vigilance, surrender are the safety on the path. If we are pursuing yoga for ambition and ego, then the moment we enter into the inner vital, we'll suddenly, even some people start experiencing siddhis. And they start believing, I'm God. Now, when you are God, God says, okay, you want to play this way, play this way. And the man who started his journey to discover God ends up discovering him through the path of the Asura. So that's not what, so always we have to, and there's several, in great detail he describes, all kinds of experiences may start coming, visions, voices, aggrandizes, anything that aggrandizes us, makes us feel, oh, you are the ultimate. People may say, don't get caught into it. Oh, you are a guru. Please, 6 feet ditch is being dug prematurely. Much better to be a child of the mother. Humble servant, the role of the servant of the divine. See, that's why in ancient disciplines, to be the servant of God, to be his slave, to be his child, it prevents us from many, many catastrophe. Or we may enter into the inner mental, where we may start getting intuitive and subliminal connections with beings of the higher mental worlds, and we may even station ourselves in any of these heights, and we may again take that station of a kind of certitude, create a belief system, have a new philosophy, and there may be many people who will follow us. It's almost like initiating a new religion. Again, it's dangerous. So, still we have to go deeper, and then we discover what Sri Aurobindo describes beautifully in Savitri, the triple soul forces. We discover that there are 3 great power stations or knowledge poises of the one soul. And we can identify with one of them. It is normally we are drawn. It's in the Mother, he speaks of the fourfold, the 4 great aspects. We may be drawn towards Maheshwari and identify with the being as the being of knowledge and light. We may be drawn towards Mahakali and identify with herself as that intense, rapturous divine love, or that truth which slays everything that is untruth, unritam. Or we may be drawn towards Mahalakshmi and suddenly there may be an outburst of love and harmony towards everything in creation. Or we may be drawn towards Mahasaraswati and perfection in every little detail and every little system of life. But even there we need not stop. But that is required to start with, so that we can, all of these may shape us. They are all mothers, they will shape us and prepare us ultimately for what Sri Aurobindo beautifully says, the supramental, where the totality, the integral divine, and then directly the mothers as the supramental Mahashakti can start moving us. So this is the process of going within. But as I said, there is a complementary movement, and that movement is that in any area of life, field of work, it's not just enough to sit and concentrate inside. So we have to become conscious of the motives that are moving us, to constantly remember that this life is given with a certain purpose, to seek, to find the divine, to serve the divine, to love the divine in all things and everywhere. The practice of equanimity, Sri Aurobindo says, when we are living outside in the world, fundamental practice is the practice of equanimity, which means at different levels. If it is hot, cold, otherwise sitting in meditation we want an AC room, or if it is, I must have the right temperature to sit and meditate. I must have the right size of cushion. Well, if you have it, fine. If you don't have it, fine. A beautiful line by Mirabai where she says, Karna fakiri fir kya dil lagiri, sada magan mein rehna ji. If someday you ask me to sleep on the floor, I'll sleep. If someday you ask me to be in a palace, I'll sleep in a palace. That is equanimity. Somebody praises us, somebody insults us, somebody criticizes us, somebody appreciates us. Take all this with a nod and humility. Special thanks to those who criticize. They are really helpful creatures. Better than flatterers for sure. Not that take them seriously. Don't take people's opinions seriously. It's the most dangerous. Otherwise, we'll start molding our life to fit into people's budgets. No, people have their opinion. They will have opinion either which way. Leave it. The only thing that matters is the divine's opinion about ourselves. And fortunately, he has no opinion. He simply changes us. He sees the truth and changes us. So constantly to be focused on that. And similarly, equanimity with regard to different ways of looking at one reality. Otherwise, we'll become like evangelistic. Oh, everybody who doesn't believe in Mother Sri Aurobindo is away from truth, is away from path. No, he leads us through countless ways. The Mother herself, when the time comes, she will reveal. Sri Aurobindo, he will reveal when the time comes. So let that time come in its own way, and each one is meant to, it's enough if people understand. And that's what Sri Aurobindo says in the human cycle. Who are the individuals who will be the harbingers of the spiritual evolution? Or shall we say spiritual revolution? He says they will not be tied particularly to this or that method or belief system. All that they will have faith in is the spiritual conversion of humanity. That there is something more, something deeper, something greater. Yes, for an individual, fine. For me, it is Mother and Sri Aurobindo. But for somebody else, yes, as long as we believe that there is something more than man, which we must explore, it is enough. So this way, when we complement this movement of going within, at the same time changing the motives of life. If the motive remains ambition and we go within, it will not work. That's why she says in the beginning, if the motive remains, I'll be a big yogi and a big guru and try to go within, it won't work. Or it may land us up into what Sri Aurobindo calls as the valley of false glimmer. So the motive should be right. It should be a genuine search for the divine, for the sake of the divine. And then when we concentrate and go within, but as I said, this is, if we have an abstraction of that I am searching for the divine within, it's very difficult. Therefore, we have representations. The representations can be in the form of any of these images. Some people meditate or concentrate on the sun, on the fire within. Or we can have directly the human representative of the divine. It makes it so much easier. Mother, we can connect and relate with her. Of course, she is much more than the human representative. But even if we take it like that at least we understand this is the divine within her and Sri Aurobindo, and when we concentrate on them in the heart, it becomes so much easier. And then a mantra with which we can connect. And when we thus sit with this changed motives, a purified understanding in the right way, we seek the right object with the right objective, then life changes. So this, in short, is the process of deepening the consciousness, going within and discovering the psychic being. It's a great discovery, And we must be armed with a patience, the mother says, as of one who is discovering continents. Impatient person finds nothing. You see, the last we know of an impatient person, sorry to say that, he went in search of India and landed up in America. He thought it is India. See, that's why Indians are attracted to America and Americans to India. Because it's a very old search. It is rooted very deep inside. He was in search of India, Columbus. And he landed up and they were red Indians. So it's gone into the psyche. It's a very deep connection we have with America. Because that's how it started. So, but we should not be. He was not impatient. He had tremendous patience. But, well, he reached a point where it was difficult. So we must be very patient. A whole lifetime is nothing because the discovery is of such a nature. And then he says it should preoccupy us. It's not like 10 minutes I'll sit in meditation or half an hour and 1 hour, have a good nap and come out and say, I've done my bit. Today my quota of concentration is over. Log it in the book. 1 hour of meditation in the heart center. And when we eat, when we sleep, when we drink water, when we meet, when we speak, when we listen, that great discovery, it should be the very purpose of our existence. The most important single thing. If somebody woke us from the sleep and said, what do you want? And we should say the divine. That should be the state of the aspirant. As you know, two little stories with which, or one little story with which we can end. See this aspiration, how it mounts. It may not start like this, but slowly it builds up. Every little effort. 10 minutes today, now I'm putting it in the other way. 10 minutes today, half an hour after a week, then slowly reading something, an urge for progress. Gradually it mounts up till it reaches a point where we cannot live without the divine. That is the moment of the apocalypse. So we have that story of Sri Ramakrishna when somebody asked him, tell me how to find God, a method. So he would ignore him. So one day he stopped him, I'll not let you go to the Ganges, tell me how to find God. He says, okay, come with me. Where are you taking me, sir? I'll give you some money, teach me a course. No, you come with me, course will be later. Let's first have a bath in the Ganges. So they go to the Ganges and then he says, take a dip. So he says, will I find the divine taking a dip? Arey, you take the dip, we'll talk about the divine later. So as he takes a dip, he puts his hand over the man and he struggles to come to the surface. After a while he releases him and says, so, what do you want? He said, sir, please spare me. I don't want anything. Just a whiff of fresh air will do. And then Sri Ramakrishna smiles and says, the day you want the divine this way, that day you will find him. So all these efforts, it's not the practice. It's the aspiration that is important. We believe by this practice it will come. Fair enough. Divine plays, as I said, by the rules of our game. We say that, well, we have to sing these bhajans, then he will manifest. This is okay. We believe that if I chant a Sanskrit mantra, he will be more lured. He says, okay. We believe that if I say in French, douce mère, she will respond. She will respond. I have seen people say with such sweetness, sweet mother. And she says, wonderful. That's what I am. We just say ma and she'll respond. So he plays according to the rules of the game. So let's make very simple rules, not complicated rules. And the simplest rule is method, practice, everything is fine. Most important is to aspire and seek for the divine. And if that is there, and we will see intuitively that the seat of aspiration in the heart, nobody has to tell us this. Automatically when we think of the divine, aspire, try thinking from here, cerebellum, and see what happens. It will enter into a maze. Eventually you will want to come out of this maze and enter into a vastness. But the moment we say divine, the aspiration, the flame is in the heart. To seek him here where he is, and to seek him with all the ardor that is at our command. To seek him in day and night, in people, in activities, in rest, in meditation, and everything and everywhere is the great royal road to finding the divine within us. And deepening the consciousness happens automatically as a result of this seeking, because the one whom we are seeking is also seeking us. So when we seek the divine, he says, good, here I pull you. So all efforts we may put, but ultimately it is grace. And what we call as the psychic being is the condensation of that grace and love. So that's why it has a direct link. The sign that we are drawing near to the psychic is this constant love for the divine, this urge to give oneself to the divine. No other part can do it. The mind will think, oh, give me a proof that God exists, then I will give. And God will say, okay, fine, read all the books. He will play by the rules of our game. The vital will say, you fulfill my desires, then I will seek you. Okay, fine. The physical will say, I don't know about God. I am born in a certain family. They say this is God and I believe this is God. But the real self-giving, that urge to give oneself to the divine and to seek the divine, knowing intuitively the sense of the divine presence, having that complete unreserved surrender and faith in the divine, that is something which is natural and native to the psyche. So when that begins to happen, we are filled with gratitude, we are filled with constant aspiration to serve and give ourselves. We are filled with a self-existent peace and delight which no possession of an object and fulfillment of desire can give us. Then we will know that we are at the right doors. One more step and all is sky and God. Thank you.